I'm Enrique Latoyson's videos brought to you by Commentary Creations, your 3-minute lawyer. Today I am super excited. We get to talk about a subject very dear to my heart. We get to talk about my family. So we're going to talk about William Henry Ridley, the first black attorney in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, who joined the bar in 1891. Today I have a very distinguished guest, Dr. Samuel Lemon. He's a professor at a local university, also the great-grandson of William Henry Ridley. Also, he's my cousin, which is awesome. And he's also an historian, and he's the person that has kept the history alive and the legacy alive of William Henry Ridley. We recently just had a plaque unveiling. Can't wait for you to see that. ABC, CBS, NBC, everyone attended that event. It was a great event. It was a beautiful event, actually. And you will have links to that, and you'll also have some video of that also. So there's a lot to cover here today, and it definitely will not be 3 minutes. So let's start off. Thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
Thank
you for the invitation.
So let's start off by you explaining who exactly is William Henry Ridley and why is he important, other than the fact that we're related to him, and what impact did he have here in Pennsylvania?
William Henry Ridley was a real pioneer of the local legal profession. His parents actually arrived in media during the Civil War as runaway slaves. Just to give you a sense of context, in 1860 there were nearly 4 million people enslaved. Only 1% successfully escaped, and his parents were among that 1%. So already, he started life with some very courageous and distinguished parents. William was born in the Minshall House here in Media in 1867. He was sickly as a child, but caught up very quickly. He graduated with honors from Media Public High School in 1887, and then for the next 4 years, he studied for the bar. Although there were a few law schools at that time, the practice was more commonly, a young man would go into the office of a distinguished local attorney and read law, as they called it, for 3 or 4 years, and then at the end of that time would take a bar exam. And then if he or she passed the bar, they would be accepted as an attorney into that local county bar. And so in 1891, William had already graduated from high school. He read law for 4 years in the office of Lewis H. Richards, who was a prominent local attorney. And after that point, he was examined by members of the bar during their examination, and he passed and was accepted as the first black attorney in the Delaware County Bar. Just to give you a little sense of perspective in terms of him passing the bar in 1891, there would not be a second black member of the Delaware County Bar until the mid-1940s. That gentleman was from Delaware. His name was Byrd. It would not be until 1960 until Robert A. Wright, a black attorney from Chester, who was the third African-American member admitted to the Delaware County Bar. And 10 years later, he became Judge Wright as he was appointed by then Governor Milton Shapp to become a judge. So from 1891 from the first black attorney to 1970 to the first black judge, that's quite a remarkable long period of time. So Ridley was a real pioneer in his profession.
So I got a couple questions for you. So let's start off by saying, I remember when I think I was in high school, we went down to Virginia to the original slave plantation.
Yes.
It was a remarkable trip. Normally when we travel anywhere, we're going somewhere for something fun, like a vacation or something. And we took this trip, we went down to Virginia. And what could you tell everyone about what we know about the parents that escaped from the slave plantation?
You're right. That was a phenomenal trip that we took many years ago. It was deeply moving because everybody wants to know where they came from. And in terms of African-American genealogical research, sometimes that's hard to know because there aren't great records. But through family history and supplementing that with documentary research, we were able to find those plantations. So Cornelius and Martha Jean Parham Ridley, who were William Ridley's parents, were actually on neighboring plantations. Neighboring in the South means 15 or 20 miles apart. They met because he had been a carriage driver on his plantation.
And what did he look like?
He had red hair, very fair skin, green eyes. When he decided to escape, he walked 300 miles to Media. And he said he was never stopped along the way because
he looked like a white guy.
Absolutely, he looked like his daddy.
Right. Who was a slave plantation owner.
Absolutely, Colonel Thomas Ridley III.
Colonel Thomas Ridley III. And as we know with the history, there was a huge history of plantation owners who would rape the slaves, yes. And he was the son of a plantation owner and a victim of rape of a slave, and then, so he looked like an Irish white guy.
You're absolutely correct. He said he never knew his mother, so we know nothing about his mother whatsoever. He did say that, however, he was treated quite well, which is unusual, and probably in part because he looked like the Ridley family.
Okay.
So his job on the plantation was that of a carriage driver, which was also unique, because the average slave never traveled more than 5 miles from home. He was able to travel far and wide. He was picking up deliveries, ferrying the Ridley family to other places. And during one of those trips, he was at another plantation, Fortsville, owned by John Y. Mason, who was a former Attorney General of the U.S. And Minister to France. And that's where he first caught a glimpse of his future wife, Martha Jane Parham.
So when they go to escape, he's able to pass by looking like the average white guy at that time, and he's able to make it all the way to Media.
Yes.
With her.
No, they actually had to travel separately.
Okay.
Because it would have been very unusual for a white man and a black woman with 2 black children, traveling the roads by themselves. So unfortunately, she and her brother, who was on the plantation with her, they each escaped when the Union Army was marching by on the way to the siege of Petersburg, Virginia. The siege lasted about a year, from 1864 to 1865. So he had a 2-year-old daughter, she had a 2-year-old and a 9-year-old. Once the Union troops were marching by, they made an escape. And once you were able to reach the Union lines, the Army would no longer return slaves to their previous owners, because they would be used to carry ammunition, to build fortifications. Initially in the war they did that, but then General Benjamin Butler said, that's ridiculous. Why are we helping the Confederacy?
So they make it all the way to Media, and then William Henry Ridley becomes the son of that marriage, of that union.
That's correct. He was the first of they had 4 children altogether, 2 in the South. They had a slave marriage in the South, which was called Jumping the Broom.
Jumping the Broom, right.
Then he was the first one born in freedom here in Pennsylvania.
So I know that there's a picture from when my great-great-grandfather, your great-grandfather, at the Bar Association.
Yes.
And what can you tell us about the interesting fact that there's 2 African Americans in that picture of the Bar Association?
You raise a really very important point. So in this big picture of members of the bar, in the very back, not only is Ridley in the middle of the picture, but in the very back there's a black gentleman who's holding a broom handle. And that's visual representation to let you know that he was not an attorney.
That he was not an attorney, and that William Henry Ridley was not holding a broom. So you knew
correct.
that guy was the, janitor at the time,
Yes.
and William
Yes.
Henry Ridley was not. So I also know there's some pretty interesting stories involving maybe a shootout, Ku Klux Klan, or some things that took place with William Henry Ridley. And what can you tell us about those interesting stories?
He had a very exciting life. The shootout occurred while he was still a law student. And so he and a couple of his friends from Media, one of their names was Hannum, they were campaigning in Chester for John B. Robinson. This was a hotly contested state Senate race. So they come out of the Colonnade Hotel at 1 o'clock in the morning after dinner, and they're accosted by members of the Hanley Hose Company, who are supporters of Jesse Baker, the opposing candidate.
So we think politics are bad now, you're saying?
Absolutely, absolutely. So this mob surrounded them. They knocked them down in the dirt. Ridley got up and protested. They knocked him down again, and then they pounced on him. In the fracas, his eyeglasses were knocked off. He was very nearsighted, so he really couldn't see. He happened to be carrying a pistol that night with him because he said people had been robbing the Media Chester stage. So he takes out his pistol, fires a shot in the air. The crowd scatters. He and his buddy go running off to meet another friend who had driven the carriage to Chester for them. They leap onto the passing carriage. The mob is firing bullets after them. Ridley was shot in the leg. The horse was shot in 3 places, and the carriage was riddled with bullets. After that occurred, Ridley was hauled into court for attempted murder of a police officer. And the reason for that is while the carriage was making its escape, a constable tried to grab the reins of the horse. Ridley, not having his glasses, didn't know who it was, and he fired a shot over the constable's head, not trying to kill him, but trying to scare him off. The carriage driver, his friend, used a buggy whip to whip the officer off. Fortunately for Ridley, when he was brought to trial on attempted murder, there were eyewitnesses who said had he not fired that warning shot, he would have certainly been murdered. And so about half the members of the Delaware County Bar testified to his good character. And so the charges were of concealed carrying a deadly weapon were upheld. The attempted murder charge was dismissed. So he was fined $25 and given a fatherly lecture by the judge. $25 today would be about $625. So, he not only learned his lesson, but it shows you the difference in race relations at that time, because they can be very severe against some people of color. But someone like William Ridley and his parents, who were highly respected, that carried a lot of weight. So the bar came to his defense. And so I feel like I've been indebted to the bar ever since because of their help.
Also, there's a story in reference to the Ku Klux Klan also.
You're absolutely right. The Klan was very active in this area. Delaware County Daily Times some years ago posted an article of a Klan rally in Delaware County. And so one night, Ridley's son-in-law, Tom Ortiga, came home. He was working as an elevator operator in Philadelphia at a store. The Klan was searching for someone who allegedly had assaulted a white girl. The truth behind the story was there was no assault. This white girl had a boyfriend who was a Cherokee Indian who was at Elwyn Institute. But when it was discovered, it was easier for her to say, well, she was assaulted. So the Klan was actually looking for this other guy. They saw Ridley's son-in-law come into the house and assumed that was him. So shortly afterwards, a mob of Klansmen wearing full robes, carrying torches, showed up in Ridley's backyard. In the house I live today, in the house where you and I played, in the backyard you and I played as children, and they wanted this guy to come out. And so Ridley went out and talked to them. And I'm sure he knew who many of them were, despite their robes, and convinced them that the person they were seeking was not there. They then left. I think someone also had called the Pennsylvania State Police, who were on their way. They left and marched up Olive Street to Sandy Bank Hill and had a cross-burning ceremony there. But it was a courageous thing for a young guy, back in the 1920s to stand up to a mob of Klansmen and not get shot or worse.
And if you think that's about as exciting as it gets, there's actually another story, unfortunately, about the youngest person ever to be executed in the state of Pennsylvania. Probably will be a movie about it one day, because I know Dr. Sam Lemon, my cousin here, has wrote a book. So tell us what the name of the book is for the viewers.
Yeah, absolutely, happy to do so. The name of the book is, it's actually a long title, but the short version is The Case That Shocked the Country. And I chose that name because this case, it was picked up by the Associated Press and made headlines all across America, from Texas to California to British Columbia in Canada on the West Coast. So this was huge news back in 1930. This was a young, learning disabled African-American student at Glen Mill School. In those days, they called them inmates, because the school really wasn't operated as a school. It was really operated as a prison for boys. And so he was falsely accused of having murdered a white house matron. Interestingly enough, this woman was one of the few people who were actually kind to him and tried to help him. And he was falsely accused of her murder. He was quickly set up and charged. He was probably interrogated 5 or 6 times without an attorney or a parent present. For a 16-year-old, this was astonishing amount of pressure, which he was not able to stand up to. I found a picture of him sitting next to the district attorney who was holding the alleged murder weapon, an ice pick, and Alexander appears to have a black eye. So to me, 5 or 6 times being interrogated, initially he vehemently, objected, to any of the accusations.
So
but I think it was beaten out of them.
If somebody wants to purchase that book, how do you go about purchasing that book?
That book is available on Amazon.
Okay. And so tell us what happened in reference to William Henry Ridley in reference to, how's it?
William Henry Ridley was given about 6 weeks to come up with a defense on a capital case.
So you had to represent him.
Absolutely. He was appointed by the court to represent Alexander.
6 weeks.
Yes. And he wasn't appointed until after Alexander had already made his 3rd confession.
Okay. Sounds like an easy case to win.
Absolutely. All white jury, white judge. The only people of color in the room were Alexander and William Ridley. Alexander's mother did attend some of the sessions, but it was fait accompli. The verdict was already decided. Ridley did, after the guilty verdict, the trial only lasted about a day and a half.
Okay.
And
so he gets found guilty.
He gets found guilty.
He gets sentenced.
He gets sentenced to be executed in the electric chair. 6 months after actually the sentencing was in February. Alexander was in the electric chair in June.
I mean, because we know now when there's somebody sentenced to death here in America, it takes years,
Yes.
10 years, 15 years. So most people in death row die of old age. They don't end up being executed.
Yes.
So you're talking he got sentenced in February, and by June he's executed.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Something remarkable happened over 100 years later, or it seemed like 100 years later. And why don't you tell us what happened, and something that you played a huge part in?
Absolutely, happy to do so. I'd like to initially say that I first heard about the story when I was about 10 years old, living with our grandmother, your great-grandmother, in the house I live in today, and it stayed with me. The story haunted me because I couldn't understand why something like this could happen. And this was one of Ridley, who was an incredibly successful attorney with a 54-year legal career, lost this case. It was one of the few cases he ever lost. Given the dynamics and background, you can see why. This kind of haunted me. And so over the years, as I grew up, I began to do primary research, find documents through the help of Mary Schaefer, inquirer for the Philadelphia Reporter, who filed a Freedom of Information Act request. The county produced the original trial transcript. Before that, they were saying, no, that's all long gone, we don't know, blah, blah, blah. When I read that trial transcript, it was heartbreaking. So I was able to, I went to the bar, asked for help. They connected me with Robert Keller, one of your colleagues.
Yes.
And
Robert Keller is a local attorney here in Delaware County.
Born in Chester, interestingly enough, as was Alexander. So we brought the case into court. Based on the research that I had uncovered, Robert Keller and Jack Stolzheimer.
Jack Stolzheimer, the district attorney of Delaware County.
They collaborated on a joint motion for a new trial. That was in June of last year.
June of 2022.
That is correct. They brought the case to then President Judge Kevin Kelly, who wanted to hear this case himself.
Yes.
On his last day as President Judge.
Yes.
Because he was, when he read the background and the joint motion, he was stunned at what an incredible miscarriage of justice this was. And he said in court that the system abandoned this boy and violated many of his legal rights. District Attorney Stolzheimer said, not only did that happen, but there were still there were still constitutional rights in 1930 and 1931, but those were completely ignored in convicting and executing this young man. Judge Kelly overturned the conviction, granted the request for a new trial, and District Attorney Stolzheimer, in all pressed, he dropped all charges.
So as it stands today, in 2023, was he ultimately convicted?
Legally, and you would know this better than I do.
Right.
He was not legally convicted.
Not legally convicted.
Not only that, but after the conviction was overturned in June, I wrote to the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons and Parole because I wanted to see if the governor would consider issuing a pardon of innocence, which happens occasionally. It's only been a few in America in the past 5 years. What the governor did do instead of that was he issued a formal proclamation recognizing and apologizing for the conviction and execution of Alexander Maclay Williams. We had a special event at the Bar Association. Celeste Trusty, who was then the secretary of the Pardons Board, personally brought that down with her from Harrisburg and hand-delivered it to Susie Williams Carter, who was Alexander's baby sister at the time. She was a year old when he was executed. She is his sole surviving direct sibling.
So the way I like to look at it is, your great-grandfather started it, and you finished it.
I felt a real obligation to him because, first of all, I live in his house.
That's true.
You and I both know he was a larger-than-life character.
Right.
He was highly esteemed by us. I looked at him as kind of a father figure, and I felt that once I read the background of the case and saw that this case was decided before he ever agreed to take it, I felt that there was some historical justice, some restorative justice that needed to occur. So, I felt it was an obligation to him, to Alexander Maclay Williams, to set the record straight. And I also connected with a descendant of the murder victim who lives in Michigan, who told me a lot of people in her family never believed Alexander committed that crime. They always thought it was Vida Rivera's husband.
So listen, this, you heard it here first, should be a movie about William Henry Ridley. From everything from shootouts to the Ku Klux Klan to being thrown into a case where it was railroaded on and someone was executed, being the first black lawyer in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, 1891. Wonderful history. I am super proud to be the great-great-grandson, which makes him the great-grandson, which makes him much older than me, William Henry Ridley. I am an attorney, and your daughter, Noelle Lemon, is an attorney also, and we are keeping this legacy going. I hope you found this video interesting, and the way you keep a legacy going is to spread the word. So if you enjoyed this video, please share it with other people. Let other people know about this great history of William Henry Ridley. Dr. Samuel Lemon, thank you very much for being here. My cousin, love you to death. And this has been your 3-minute lawyer, probably more like a 30-minute video, and brought to you by Commentary Creations. Thank you.
Thank you.
2, 3.